Welcome to the Irish Snug Podcast. Okay, welcome back to the Irish Snug. Before we get into the show, I'd just like to ask everyone, if you're enjoying the podcast, please hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or hit the follow button on your favorite podcast platform. The podcast is growing each week, and I appreciate you sharing the podcast links, and I appreciate your support. Today's guest is a man who truly needs no introduction in the firehouses within New York City. Ed Kilduff served the FDNY for 37 years, rising through the ranks to become the 34th Chief of Department, which is the highest-ranking uniformed officer in the FDNY. He was a leader during some of the department's most pivotal moments, from the recovery efforts at Ground Zero to reshaping the FDNY for the 21st century. He's been recognized and honored by numerous organizations, including the FDNY Emerald Society, that made him the 2007 Irishman of the Year. And he's also an honorary member of the FDNY Emerald Society Bagpipe Band. Welcome to the Snug, Chief.
Good morning, Tim. How are you? Great to be with you.
I know that you were on the famous Getting Salty podcast,
Right?
And I'm actually going to put that link in the bio down, in the description below.
Yeah.
Because I encourage people to actually learn more about your entire remarkable career on the FDNY, and that podcast really paints a great picture of that kind of stuff. But here today, I think we're going to touch more on. What we're going to touch on a little bit on how the Irish have influenced FDNY, going back many, many years, and a little bit about where it is today, and that type of influence. I will say this: I watched when your podcast came out with Getting Salty. I watched it when it came out, and that's a while ago. But I watched it again recently, and there's one remarkable thing, Chief, that stuck out in my head this particular time going through it. You really go out and mention so many of the members that have influenced your career. There's so many people that you mention, and I counted. You had over 100 people that you mentioned in there.
Yeah.
And the remarkable part
your legacy,
it is
your fire department legacy, and start right from the get-go, and people have an impact on you, And
well, your leadership, I've noticed your leadership throughout the years, and you have a remarkable leadership. You even mentioned, I think it was J.J. Johnson, how you saw how this particular guy was somebody that was a great person, really nice guy, and you said to yourself, I want to be an officer like this guy. I want to be like this guy. Well, Chief, I'm going to tell you right now, I think there's not one person on the FDNY that doesn't look to you and say the same exact thing. I want to be like that guy.
Thank you, Tim.
That's true story. That's true.
Thank you.
But the remarkable thing I brought up with out of those 100 members that you mentioned, more than half of them, way more than half of them, have Irish last names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wrote down Pudgy Walsh, Jimmy Doherty, Jack Flynn, Maloney, Keane, Al Hagan, McNally, Sheehan, McCarthy, Hickey, Lyons, Ryan, John O'Hagan, Liam Flaherty, I should say, Brian Fox. I mean, all these Irish. I only just listed a few there, but there's that it kind of paints a picture. There's still a lot of Irish influence in the department even today, but it goes back a long way.
Well, when you walk into the kitchen of any firehouse, you're looking for commonality. You're looking for somebody who looks like you, looking for a familiar face. That tends to be somebody that thinks like you, that acts like you, that has the same values and all. And I just feel the Irish would be attracted to the Irish in a sense, that that commonality is always there. So that's really the groundwork. That's really the platform for how you go about carrying yourself in the firehouse, I think, is finding that commonality with certain members, finding the members that impressed you, that mean something to you, not only in the firehouse, but you know what their family values are and what they stand for. And I think a lot of folks are attracted to that stalwart Irish guy that's standing there that has a presence in the kitchen. It's not always an Irish guy, of course, but that's who you become attracted to, and that's who you find, similar, similar commonality with. So I'm with you all the way on that. That's right out of the gate.
Yeah, and it's not to knock any other nationality or any Italian, or there was a lot of Italian, German. We've really been privileged to work with such great human beings on our job, and I'm not saying that the Irish were the only ones in any way, shape, or form, but there was a commonality.
Yeah.
It really was something that just. And I think it goes way back in time, back probably even to the time of the 5 Points in New York City, when it was, they were volunteers back then, right? There wasn't even a paid department back then.
Yeah.
But Irish neighborhoods, Irish gangs probably were part of these old bucket brigades, but during the time of the Civil War. Let's talk about that for a second. You mentioned to me that that's really how far back any of your Irish ancestry goes back, is back to the time of the famine, I guess. And you had a great-great-grandfather that was actually in the fight in 69th?
Yes. John Kilduff. We figured that he came over in the very early 50s, so that would kind of be at the end of the potato famine over there. We can't really figure out what he did. There was the term laborer used, but he lived on 14th Street. And from what we gathered, I think there was still that influence, even though it wasn't 5 Points right there. I think that whole mindset back then was basically survival. If you think about how many Irish were around, they weren't working. We realized that he had moved 2 or 3 times just within buildings on 14th Street. So I'm sure if you got paid $3 or $5 more a month, you probably got an extra bedroom for your family someplace. It was a bit of a scramble, I would think, going on with the thousands and thousands of Irish that were there coming out of that Irish gang into the era of now we need to establish ourselves because now we have families and all. And so my great-great-grandfather, John Kilduff, joined the Fighting 69th in the Lexington Avenue Armory in 1962. He listed
1962?
1862.
1862.
1862.
Yeah, I know.
He listed himself at the time as firefighter. That was his occupation, although we have the term laborer at another time. And I would imagine he probably worked for the insurance companies where they all had their own fire station and the insurance company paid their guys to look out for their buildings. But he went into the service. And back then, this was before the draft riots. Who knows why he went in, but in reading up on it, it seems like a lot of these folks, these hard first generation, really were floundering a little bit, needed to form an identity for themselves. We're going to help the union for a couple of different reasons, but we're going to bind together, help the union. And when we're finished establishing ourselves as union soldiers, we're now going to have a better life in the United States. We're going to come back from the war and we're going to be established as the Irish is going to be an established group. From what I'm reading and all, that's basically what I think they had the mindset for. We know that there was some heavy hitter Irish brigades in the Civil War that were really dependent on almost in a suicidal manner that if we can't find somebody to do it, we'll get the Irish to do it. And sure enough, those bands of Irish that were in the war, they were probably like a little gang in themselves in a way of pride and pride for their brigades and everything. They carried their own flags, I'm sure. And we all know, Antietam, we all know Gettysburg, we know the stories. Now, my great-great-grandfather ended up in Petersburg, in the siege of Petersburg, which was basically, I think, about a 9 or a 10-month siege. And he was killed there. We don't know the circumstances. But I stopped by the battlefield in Petersburg on my way back from Florida a few years back. And sure enough, he's there in the computer. Sure enough, he's there in the... he doesn't have his own grave, but he's there listed as buried outside of Petersburg in Virginia. And we've got the documentation from the Lexington Avenue Armory. So, that is my family's first cognizance of Irish in New York. Now, my mother's family also lived on 14th Street in the 1860s. Their name was Hamilton. They came as Baptist to New York, and somewhere along the line they were converted to Catholic. So both of our families came off 14th Street in the 1860s and moved forward as New Yorkers.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's actually probably a pretty good feeling. I mean, that grit and military tradition of the Fighting 69th also kind of laid the groundwork, I think, for what the fire department eventually became as like sort of a paramilitary organization.
Right. Yes.
Did you said you read the book The Immortal Irishman?
I did, yes.
By Timothy
By accident.
Egan?
I found it in a bookstore, I think in Vermont, maybe 5 years ago. I said, let me see, what is this about? I really didn't have any idea, and the more I read, I'm like, holy jeez, this guy's incredible,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. Thomas Francis Meagher. If anybody didn't read that book, you gotta look it up on Amazon or something.
Yeah.
Thomas Francis Meagher, guy was captured in he was sent to Australia, right? A penal colony in Australia.
Tasmania. Yeah, there it is right here.
Yeah. Oh, you got it right there. Good.
Yeah. Timothy Egan. Yeah, it's quite a book. Quite a guy.
It is. It's yeah, and it's a quick read too. You could read. You don't want to put that book down.
Yeah, he was a shit stirrer during the trouble, not the troubles, but the potato famine over in Ireland. Finally, they caught up with him, sent him to Australia. I think he did a little Tasmanian time, and they figured that was the end of him. But maybe the most resourceful guy I've ever read about in my life got his way out of there and landed in New York, and here we are, wartime, and the guy ended up being a general, right?
Yeah, he's the one who led the fight in 69th at the Battle of Antietam and then the Battle of Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
That's after 9/11, it was a couple of years after 9/11, Chief Nigro, just for anybody that doesn't know, the chief of department at the time of 9/11 was Chief Cansey. Yeah. And then Chief Nigro took over shortly after. And there was a plaque dedication. I played the bagpipes at this dedication, and Chief Nigro made a speech and how he compared the firemen on 9/11 to the Irish Brigade at the Battle of Antietam. Apparently, this battle was going to be lost. The North they weren't going to be able to take this bridge or something, and the Irish came out of nowhere and started yelling, "Clear the way" in Irish, which I believe is "Fa Abalach" or something like that. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but they were screaming it. He said the way he explained it, the story was so good, But it was a nice analogy to how we kind of attributed the two.
I would agree with the analogy, number one. And number two, we know Lincoln himself, would tell his generals, get the Irish, this is going to be a tough job, whatever it was, let's get the Irish. And sure enough, the Irish, I think that was an army within the army in a sense, and no different than the fire department being, a standing army that's going to be put to work, not to put the fire out, but to restore order to the calamity, restore order to the city, whatever the situation is. And that's how I would always tell the fire department. Yeah, we can put the fires out, but we're back in the firehouse in 2, 3, 4 hours, and the fires always go out. But when there's a calamity going on, and obviously the Trade Center was our calamity, but you go back to Hurricane Sandy and a few other situations, the blackouts. Who restores order to the city? It's the fire department. The police, they do a wonderful job protecting the city, keeping the city as safe as they can, but who restores order to the city? And that's the fire department. And you just push it that way. Who restored order in the Civil War? Who are the ones that were called on for the toughest jobs in the Civil War? It was the Irish. Why? Because they had that band together. They had that sense of pride among themselves, and they had something to prove. More than anything else, they had something to prove.
Yeah. My on my mother's side, my great grandfather, or I guess it's two greats, I'm not sure which one. John Delmore was his name. He came from Ireland, and he was 16 years old and fought in the Civil War. Imagine fighting at 16 years old.
Yeah, and maybe somebody paid him $100 to do it.
Right.
The way it was going back then. What else are you going to do? Whatever it was, that was a job. He was going to get a salary.
Yeah. And a lot of times, so I think a lot of those folks came after the war, particularly the Irish in New York City, became firefighters and police officers because those were really the only jobs they could get. Right? No Irish need apply.
Yeah, for sure. And there's always the caricature of the Irish cop on the corner. It was true in a sense, but like you said, who else would step up for those jobs?
Yeah.
My grandfather, who was also John Kilduff, became a cop, born in 1885, so he would have been John Kilduff, the Civil War soldier's grandson. He became a cop in 1910, and he remained a cop until 48, I think. And he lived up in Washington Heights, and worked almost his whole career in the 3-4 precinct, which at the time was right about where the base of the George Washington Bridge is. And he lived on Audubon Avenue around 172nd Street, which is where my father was born. But he played bass drum in the police band, but it was a marching band at the time. But he played almost his whole career in the police band, and then he played with them after he retired. He also played the bass drum for the Elks on Queens Boulevard. It shows you the scale of the Elks back then. They had a band that marched in the St. Patrick's Parade. And I have a really wonderful Daily News article of him in his police uniform playing the band, playing with the police band. And then what he would do is he'd get on the subway, take the subway back downtown, change out of his police uniform, put the Elks uniform on, and he'd march the parade again.
Oh, that's interesting.
He did that all through the 20s, 30s, 40s, into the 50s.
Wow.
Retired guy. So there's your Irish police officer, who was my grandfather, and one of his first jobs was at Spuyten Duyvil. They had a drawbridge, or one of those bridges that rotated or something like that. And he rode his bike up there from the precinct every day and collected a 10-cent toll from the trucks coming into Manhattan, making deliveries to Manhattan. That might have been the only way in at the time. I guess the Brooklyn Bridge was built, but so that's what he did. He collected tolls on Spuyten Duyvil, on the bridge coming into Manhattan on Broadway there,
Wow.
But I have to say that, he and my mother's side also, they weren't Irish households as far as, on Sundays they would play some Irish music, put the record player on, but they just weren't Irish households. Like, in retrospect, looking back at some of my friends and some other folks that we know, I kind of wish that they paid a little more attention and pressed that Irish heritage a little more down. I'm not sure why. I think there was a lot of Irish first and second generation born here that were like that. They wanted to be American, which was wonderful, obviously, but we kind of lost that little bit of Irish heritage through those years because when we went to, I never knew my grandmothers, but in the grandfathers, they never really pressed the Irish down on us, you know?
I think depending on the different waves of Irish diaspora that came
Yeah,
to America, some of them when they came here because of the oppression and the way they were treated, a lot of them tried to eliminate their identity. Back
yeah,
then, some of them changed their names or they changed the spelling of their names. Some of them tried to get rid of their Irish accent as quickly as they could.
right.
But
Yeah,
that was a different wave. And then years later, new waves were coming through. People that were just there, things were different here, and there was just more work here. That was really that wave. So I think a lot more loyalty and people being proud of their Irishness, I guess, became more of a thing later on.
yeah, I think so. And I think a lot had to do with siblings and family and communities and things like that. But in New York City, it was every person for themselves. If you think about, the turn of the century back from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, those were tough times. And the
Yeah.
Irish was still the laborers, the cops, and the firemen. So to step away and get away from that, you had to become American. You wanted your kids to basically get those civil service jobs or something beyond that, whether you were a construction fellow or building bridges, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Listen, the Irish
Yeah.
and the Italian built the city. People don't remember that part of it. But
Yeah.
that's what they became.
Yeah. So you're 37 years on the department. There's definitely an Irish Catholic foundation within a lot of the fire department
Right.
during all those years, and even those that aren't claiming like that Irish heritage. Did you see a specific brand of humor, loyalty, and grit that shaped FDNY as a family?
Yes, it just seemed like the Irish Catholic platform again was the platform for the fire department. I remember in the 90s we were talking among ourselves, and I forget who we were talking with, but somebody, one of the chiefs that worked downtown, and we're having a conversation, and oh yeah, the job's Irish, the job's Irish, and he says no, he says actually we actually looked into this as best we could. And this was the 90s. He says the job is basically split, Irish and Italian. And we're like, no way, come on. But he said it, so I guess maybe it was. But that said, the Irish Foundation, and I think the band probably had more to do with that than anybody, particularly as you came through the 80s, 90s up to the Trade Center. And obviously, that was
Mm.
really solidified after the Trade Center. But I think the band had a lot to do with that, just because that was our rallying point. The band was the flag that we put up the flagpole whenever we needed to either celebrate or mourn, an occasion or one of our firefighters. That was the rallying point. Everybody rallied around the band. The band started the event and the band finished the event. And it wasn't started and finished until the band played. Now, I think that perception was also what elevated that Irishness in the firehouse as well, because I think that's the rallying cry was the band, was the Irishness of the job, was the going to a church for a funeral or going to a church for a function. And we were all in. And I think we all became a family because of it. But the Irishness was certainly the the platform, I think, for where that camaraderie and where that spirit came from.
Mm. And there's
It's
just a
it's
certain
abstract though,
sense of humor. Sorry?
It's abstract. It's just what you said. It comes in a little bit from the culture, a little bit from the humor. A lot of it has to do with basically it's bar talk. But when you're growing up in Rockaway, in Woodside, in the Bronx, and then as families moved up to Pearl River and moved out to the island, the Irish families still had that connection among themselves and still had that identity. So even those generations that came in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and in our generation, 70s, 80s, 90s, don't forget, we all came from these neighborhoods. We all came from the Woodsides, the Sunnysides, the Brooklyns, the Bronx. And even if our family now moved to Pearl River or moved out to, Smithtown or someplace, the Irish were still there. My wife's father was a firefighter from 38 to 59. He joined the fire department, I think, because his mother was Irish, his father was a warden in the jail system, and I think civil service worked for him. He always identified with the Irish at that point. He was living up on Hamilton Terrace, right next to 80 and 23's firehouse there. That's where they lived for the first 10 years they were married. And he always had that too. But he would say, the Irish cops were all there, he says, but they had a lot of Jewish folks with them too. They had a lot of Jewish firemen at the time, a lot of Jewish cops. But the Jewish folks wanted their kids to become doctors and lawyers. The Irish folks, go take the test, take the test, right? And that continues now to this day. So,
it does.
It's how these things kind of parse out, but go take the test is what prevails in the firehouse. The mothers and fathers telling their kids, go take the test. And we did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the same with a lot of the trades too, right? Like the steam fitters, the sandhogs, like they all kind of, it was a family thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't uncommon. It wasn't, I mean, throughout my career, it wasn't uncommon to hear an Irish accent on the radio, right?
Oh,
you used to hear that. It wasn't uncommon at all. John Vaughan, Eamon Killian.
Eamon was the best, right? Yeah.
Can you recall any famous Eamon Killian stories on the radio?
It's funny because I was in 34 truck over in Washington Heights, and we would come across the bridge for any fires that we would be maybe second or third alarm truck in quite a few cases. We'd come across the bridge at 161st Street. So if we heard all hands in the Bronx, second alarm in the Bronx, we'd throw the Bronx radio on just to see what was going on. And Eamon would always, would many times be running to, oh, be Jesus, it's out 30 windows, 40 windows, he'd have something, And I'm like, who is this? But he worked over there, so the guys knew him, and they would listen out for him. So he worked over in Manhattan originally. Okay, so then now I become a captain many years later, and I'm bouncing around the 6th Division, and now I'm working with Eamon as an ADC sometimes. And I said, so finally, I'm getting to, I met him, but now I'm getting to spend time with Eamon. And Eamon always had a book in his lap. If you didn't know that, many people will tell you that he'd be when the chief went into the firehouse to say hello to the firefighters, he'd have a book in his lap. He always had a book in his lap. He was an incredible reader. And what are you reading, Eamon? Oh, and he'd start talking. Eamon, let's go. We got to go. Let's go to the next firehouse. But he was wonderful, and actually they worked in the same firehouse for quite a while, John Vaughan and Eamon, and
right
in the Green Berets, right, of all places. That's where they were.
17 to 60.
So there's that tradition. I think tradition might be the operative word for what you're trying to get at a little bit, because I think the Irish, more than anybody else, had that tradition from generation to generation to generation. And we all were very aware of the tradition, and we respected the tradition, and we respected those that insisted on carrying on the tradition. And they were the Irish in the firehouse. The Italian folks had tradition, and that was very deeply rooted, very family rooted. But it just seemed like the Irish prevailed in that sense. I think because of the culture and because of the history of the Irish being the step-up folks in New York City. Yeah.
Just a quick story about Eamon again, and maybe you know this story, but for the folks listening that don't know, when there's a fire going on, is the dispatcher is always asking for the battalion aide to give them a size up of the building, which would be, it's 100 by 100 commercial occupancy, 6-story, whatever it is. That's the size.
And there's a format.
So the dispatch, and there's a format, right?
Yeah.
And the dispatcher is on the radio begging Eamon to give a size up of the building. And he says on the radio, "Oh, it's massive."
Massive. Yeah.
Oh, it's
a little
massive.
out of format, but yeah. Yeah. Where do we go from here? Send help.
That's great. Yeah, send more lads.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Chief, let's move on to trips to Ireland. You took a couple trips to Ireland, right? You went to
I've been there.
Kinsale.
Been there 3 times. Only once since the Trade Center, and that was I'd say 6-7 years ago. We went with the group actually of our friends from Queens, and we had a wonderful tour guide. He took us all over the place. I think one of the last places we went to was Kinsale, which I was aware of the memorial over there, and I knew people were going back and forth. When I was working, I probably should have gotten out and took 1 or 2 of these trips when folks were going over there, particularly for the Trade Center, but I always felt that it was necessary for me to be here. But when we finally got there and we pulled into town, I said, all right, we're in Kinsale. This is where the memorial is. Catherine, right? Built the memorial.
Yeah. Catherine Murphy.
But we only had 2 nights there. So first I had to find the bar, and I can't remember the name of it, that every wall in the bar is pictures of FDNY guys and
that's the White House.
The White House.
The White House. That's the name.
Well, and we were told that's where you go, And everybody I was with, I was the only firefighter. I think there was maybe 6 or 7 couples. They were just in awe of this bar. We didn't leave for hours. We were supposed to go out to dinner. We canceled. We just stayed there. We walked around. We talked to people. It was wonderful, And then going out to the memorial the next day, I think it really, for everybody that I was with, they were all well-entrenched New Yorkers. They had the top respect for the fire department. They knew me well. We all knew each other well. They were all couples with the, kind of the same generation. But they were just in silence. They were silenced by the fact that over here in Ireland, they felt so strongly about the sacrifices of all 9/11, but particularly the fire department, that something like this was built and then institutionalized to the point of where it really was a mandatory stop for any visitor that goes to Ireland. So that was a special 2 days. I'm even getting texts in the last couple of weeks of a few folks now talking about going over there for the 25th anniversary of September 11th instead of staying here. Some folks I'm in, some I'm not, but there seems like there's a couple of small little delegations going over for the 25th anniversary for the Trade Center.
Okay, yeah. So for the people that are listening, for the people that are listening that are unaware of the memorial we're talking about, I highly encourage anybody going to Ireland to visit Kinsale. First of all, Kinsale is one of my favorite towns in all of Ireland. I love Kinsale. Spot. But they have, there was a nurse that worked at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City for over 30 years, and she was from Ireland, and she went home, and right after 9/11, 2 months after 9/11, I don't know if you know this, but it was only 2 months after 9/11, she planted the first tree. She planted a tree, 343 trees, one for every New York City firefighter that lost their life on 9/11 on her family property in right outside of Kinsale. And that memorial is something that everybody should visit. It really is an amazing place. The trees are being kept. I've been there a few times, and some of the trees have died, so they've replaced it. I think Freddie Ill's tree might have died in that, because last time I was there, it was a new tree.
Yeah.
So they're doing a nice job. When I first went there, it was just like a little tag. Every tree has a fireman's name on it.
Right.
And now they actually have stakes in the ground with the name on the stake, so that the tags aren't blown away with the wind.
Right.
but definitely something people should go see.
It's subtle, but it sends a powerful, powerful message, and it's just wonderful that somebody felt that way. We have the fellas
Was
that
it?
go over now via the Friends of Firefighters and do the bike ride over September 11th. A lot of the 50 and 19 guys have been going over and doing that nice bike ride, however many miles, 343, and then some, for a couple of other causes. But that's a nice tradition that's been started. There's 50, 60 guys go over for
Absolutely.
that. And they really,
Yeah.
I've done a couple of, I don't know if they'd be called podcast or webcast, I guess, for a few different plaque dedications around Ireland, where they put on a few folks out of headquarters to make a statement and to basically give a quick little talk or an introduction into what they were doing and everything. And people just keep bringing. I saw you one day talk about that. Like somebody from Ireland. They were putting a plaque in. They were raising steel up in some town in the city, in Ireland. I saw you. I remember seeing you. I remember, they're very, very committed to what the fire department did on
What
September
happened.
11th, and clearly they know the contributions over generations that the Irish made to the fire department and to the city.
Yeah. The one thing I forgot to mention was when Kathleen first planted that first tree, the 343 trees were finished within 6 months. So this is within 6 months of 9/11. And from what I read, it's the very first permanent memorial. And we call it a living memorial because it's trees, right?
Yeah.
It's the very first permanent memorial in the world for 9/11. I'm not sure if there was any other ones in the U.S. that went up sooner, but I don't think we weren't thinking about that kind of stuff at that point. We were still digging.
Yeah, I mean, what a beautiful gesture that was for somebody, for her to go home, so to speak, and put that up, and think of all the Irish folks that have driven through there over the years and paused at that spot for what she did. That's, like you say, it's a living memorial, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. I encourage anybody to go there.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you remember visiting any particular? Were there any trees that you wanted to see? But people.
No, I have a couple of wrist bracelets. I have a couple of badges around. Obviously, there was a few people. I think it was more that their stories, in a sense, that would just capture me, But no, when I just walk up to a tree, or you walk up to a plaque, or you flip a page, and you just pause and say, oh yeah, Joe, yeah, oh Bill, yeah, Mike,
It's endless.
I obviously. Everybody had a great affection for Pete Gansey and Bill Fee and folks like that.
Father Judge,
and who obviously is who spurred on Catherine's the tree planting. I mean, the first tree she planted was for him.
Yes.
Yeah, Father Judge. I tried to jump into the Father Judge walk every year if it wasn't a conflict with another September 11th event. But that, the McDonald family was so great in still keeping that going. That's still a beautiful day to spend in New York City. The Father Judge walk from St. Francis and the firehouse down to the Trade Center. So, but I just, everybody has a story, and when after the Trade Center, I made it my business. After I became the Brooklyn Borough Commander, I wanted to know the stories of the folks that traveled across the bridge into Manhattan, seeing where they were going. There's that famous picture of 118 truck on the Brooklyn Bridge going across the Brooklyn Bridge with the smoke of the Trade Center's buildings, in front of them. So I tried to get to know who these folks were. And I also tried to get to know their families. And knowing the families was really something I really went out of my way to do. And I always felt that that was my job, was to envelop the families, make the families know that people are thinking of them, whether it's just simply a hello. When I go down the site, Jimmy Riches was always there. Dennis Oberg was always there. Lee Ieppe was always there. John Vigiano, they were always there. And, I'm talking about anniversaries of September 11th. And, just go up. You didn't have to have a half-hour conversation. You just had to make sure they knew that they were recognized, their families, their family sacrifice was recognized, and say a few words to them. So, we all have our handful of guys that, you felt like a knife got put through you, but, everybody was like that. Everybody was the same. Everybody went down there, they shaped up, they did what they were asked to do. Many of them went above and beyond, and they paid the price, and they all deserve equal respect. In my opinion, just whoever that person is that's the person of the day, if you ask me.
So, in my opinion, this is one of the reasons why your leadership, I think, was so important to the entire department. You have a way of talking to people and making them feel like they're the only person in the room, that you're spending all of your attention on them, and you make them feel important. And that's a difficult thing for leaders. And I'm giving you good pats on the back here, but it's the truth. I really mean it. There's a specific type of leader that was needed at the time when you became the leader. And I'm not just talking about the chief of department, but through when you were Brooklyn Borough Commander, and like all through your entire career, the captain of 92 Engine. You know how to talk to people, and you were a tremendous leader through.
Well, I appreciate it, but
I'll
just to go back to your example of Dan Nigro talking about the Irish in Antietam. It takes work, and you have to do your homework. And I don't mean to pat myself on the back and blow my horn, but that takes work to know who each individual is, to remember the names, and to remember where and what and who worked where and things like that. And we had a great group of people after the Trade Center who could pull that together. I mean, there was nobody better than Sal Casano at knowing who was who, and who the players were, whether they were fire department or whether they were folks in out to Pete Hayden. All these people, they knew who the players were, they knew who the families were, they knew what their job was. So yes, I did my job, and it came a little later after September 11th, perhaps, but all those folks, they were all in, and if you weren't greeting families, you were putting your head down in an office in headquarters, or over at the training academy, or in the firehouses trying to get things done. That will always be the greatest lift and the greatest compliment and the greatest achievement of the fire department, is not September 11th in a sense, but what happened after September 11th. And guess who put the flag up the flagpole for us to rally the troops? It was the pipe and drum band. They were the guys at the charge of the brigade, basically. And we'll say it as the heart and soul.
It was a struggle then, and it's the heart. That was what I was going to ask you.
The heart and soul of the fire department, right? Yeah. I use that phrase. Pete Hayden may have come up with that. I may have heard him say that, but nobody was better than Pete Hayden in recognizing that either. What's our rallying cry? Well, let's show up with the band, and whatever the event is going to be, whatever the memorial is going to be, it's going to be done right. Look at the ceremonial unit. Look what they brought to the table afterwards, and all right. Everybody raised their game. Everybody stepped up. So it wasn't individuals as much. It was just that gathering and that camaraderie that needed to elevate the department beyond what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite the struggle, and it continues to be a struggle with guys still passing away, and we're still having funerals, and it's I don't see the light at the end of the
I'm
tunnel.
hoping the 25th anniversary kind of brings that full circle, because we're not losing sight of it, but like you say, once a month, once every other month, we're losing somebody to September 11th illness. And we are losing that. We're losing the relevance and importance of that a little bit, just because it's become built into our routine. Another announcement, another announcement. I know the band shows up for all these folks. It's not an easy job, but
It's
I'm
it's
hoping.
difficult. I look at after 30 years of being in the bagpipe band, I look at the times that I had when I first joined, and we had a lot of great times and a lot of fun. And after 9/11, particularly maybe like after 10 years after now, when things started happening, the funerals were kicking up, and now you're really doing a lot more somber things than happy things, and that's okay. That's what we're there to do.
Right.
But it's very difficult I think it's difficult for guys that we have guys coming on the job now that weren't even born on 9/11.
Yeah.
So, and these guys are still stepping up and taking care of business.
Mm-hmm.
It's now, you mentioned you hope that the 25th anniversary kind of brings this thing full circle. It also happens to be the 250th anniversary of our country.
Right.
So I think in closing here, Chief, why don't we talk about your perspective on the never forget promise as we move forward? How do you think we keep that promise active for those guys that weren't even born on 9/11, and we're moving forward into the
I'd love to see September 11th built into the curriculum for junior high students. And I'm repeating what I've read a couple of places, like that's the audience that would understand the historical perspective of September 11th. Depends on who writes history, I guess, in some cases. But first, that's the first step I think we need to do. But I would imagine that clearly the 250th anniversary of the country is rooted back from the Revolution forward. I don't know if you've looked at the Ken Burns depictions of the Revolutionary War. It's basically just wrapping up now on the PBS. It's well done, and
Okay,
I'll tell you, I didn't realize how much blood and guts was spilt in the Revolutionary War, because as Ken Burns' story was telling us, we keep looking at pictures of the fife and drum corps coming over the hill and soldiers carrying their muskets, and these skirmishes up in Concord, in Massachusetts, and then all of the founding fathers gathered in Philadelphia drafting, the Declaration of Independence and everything. But that's not what happened. And from the deep South up through Canada, the Patriots were fighting a war against the British and getting killed, like really getting really beat up badly. But I think as we run up to present time, I think September 11th has to be an extremely pivotal, milestone in our country. And I just worry that the younger folks don't give it the same relevance as importance as we do. People move on to some degree. It's not only the relevance of the attack on our country, but it's the relevance of the sacrifices that were made by the police, the fire, the Port Authority, and all those civilians that were innocent victims by the folks on the airplanes. That needs to be told. That story needs to be told. Perhaps, as you said, the 25th anniversary and the 250th anniversary can kind of merge a path in that. And, maybe we might find a commonality again, and that can educate the generation or two that's right behind us.
Yeah.
But it is extraordinary when you think about it. 25 years it's extraordinary.
I can't even get over it.
Yeah,
The Tunnel to Towers is an organization that's doing a great job with
they are
keeping that kind of stuff. They have that mobile museum. It's traveling all over the country, and it's teaching high school, or not. It's teaching everybody that wants to know. It's going to schools. It's going all over. I do a little bit of volunteering with that. I just started, but that's
$11 a month. That's a little reminder that why am I contributing? I'm contributing because in the name of Steven Siller, I'm contributing money to help a first responder that came after. That in itself acts as a nice reminder to folks.
Yeah. And so I'll remind anybody, if you've never heard of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, look it up online. Okay. And for as little as $11 a month, it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
For keeping that spirit of never forget.
So before we finish, I'll be the interviewer. What's your thoughts on the 25th anniversary and the 205th anniversary of the country?
As they're happening together or separately?
Yeah, with the relevance and how the Trade Center is going to factor into the 250th anniversary, and again, how are we going to keep it relevant?
Yeah.
In people's minds.
Chief, I wish I could answer that. I don't. Today, it's I don't like to get into politics whatsoever with the podcast, but it's honestly the way the country is so divided right now is bothersome.
Yeah.
Where do we go to actually to try and fix that? I think that the divisiveness in the country makes people not interested in, like what you were saying. I mean, we've had a little stint here where people want to erase certain parts of our history. So is this part of our history going to be erased for political reasons? I don't know. It's definitely, I wish more people could come to the table and talk about that.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about who is going to be the standard bearer for this, especially the 250th anniversary. Are we going to have faith and confidence in whoever the face of that is, and who's ever going to attempt to bring everybody together? So let's see what happens. But we certainly can't lose the 25th anniversary of the Trade Center from a local perspective. We can't lose that. And we own that. So we're going to make sure that's done right.
Yeah.
And then hopefully...
I know the bagpipe band will
come
be
first. July 4th will basically be the 250th anniversary. That's coming soon. That's coming quick.
Yeah, that's right around the corner.
And then we're obviously going to jump off that and run do the 25th anniversary. So, it's up to us to keep it going. You're doing a nice job here because you're always going to link it together somehow. The fire department's going to hold things together, but I think the important thing is to get that out into the schools just so it becomes a stop for every young person that's learning, whether it's political, science or history or whatever. They know what happened and what took place. And
one of the questions that, like I said, I just started volunteering with the mobile museum for Tunnel to Towers, and one of the questions or things I'll tell the young kids is to go home and ask their parent where they were when they heard about the planes crashing into the World Trade Center. Yeah. Those little things, getting it into a little kid's mind of, all right, I'm going to go home and I'm going to ask my mom that. They're going to remember that. I hope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
I have in my closet, I got to break it out. I have a folder of, remember after the 11th, all of the schools were sending the firehouses the kids were drawing pictures and all, and the pictures and letters and everything were all over the firehouse, all throughout the hall. You walk down the hall and all the, because they were all, taped up in the firehouse.
Yeah.
I have a packet full of them that were sent to me because I was the pipe major of the band at the time, and I was running the website, during 9/11. So everything was coming to me, and I have this packet. I'd love to connect the kids that were in those school at that time to the packet. Maybe I should
make all in their 30s now.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I'd like to do that. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe that's an idea for a podcast episode.
There must be an identifier on it from PS something or
there is. The one thing that I have the teacher who was in charge of it or something like that. I got to look at it. I haven't looked at it in years. It's just in a manila envelope in my closet.
Yeah, I was on the phone earlier today with a friend of mine who's down in Naples. I'm headed down there next week, and he has a coffee group in the morning. They all go walking or they all go to the gym, and they meet in the back of a club, and maybe there's 10 or 12 of them, and they drink coffee for an hour and they chat themselves up before they go back home. And he just asked me this morning, he says, when you're down, would you, and I jump in sometimes, would you come and talk to us about September 11th? Now, these are all my folks my age and maybe even a little older. But he said, would you mind coming over and chatting them up about September 11th, next couple of weeks in the morning? I said, I'd love to, and I still kind of do that here and there. You get asked to make a few comments or speak to somebody or whatever. Now, that's not our audience that we're talking about. That's not who we need to educate. But half of them are Canadian. Half of them are from the Midwest, most likely, and one or two folks from the Northeast. And everybody is vested in this September 11th. They know, they don't want to forget that. They don't want that. They want to know what happened, what's going on, what transpired, where are we now? That's where we need to be. So let's see how we can push that and how we can keep that alive, but
every little bit counts. Even Absolutely. What I'm doing right here, yes, this is the Irish Snug Podcast. We tied a little bit about how the fire department was Irish in this, and we're bringing in a little bit of, we're a little bit fire department heavy in this episode, but it does matter because we are in the 25th anniversary of 9/11, so I think people should be interested in a little bit.
Well, and going back to the Civil War till present day, there's definitely a common thread there.
Yeah.
And we should all be very proud for that, too. Not only what we did, what you did, what I did, you're still doing it by being a member of the band. That's extraordinary that there's so many retired folks in the band, so many retired guys in the band that are still so committed to representing the fire department, making sure that the fire department is well represented. And they basically represent all of us when you turn out for whatever gig you have, unfortunately for a lot of memorials, but you're representing all of us.
Yeah.
And and it's appreciated. And you do hold the standard for the department. It's when the band shows up, get behind the band and let's go.
Well, this podcast is it has a growing number of listeners. It's nothing crazy yet, but for the people who are listening, maybe you can also spread the word about what we're talking about right here and never forgetting, and especially on this 25th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah, feel part of it, own part of it. Everybody owns it. Everybody in New York City owns, not only should you be proud of your country, I don't know if you remember Opsail, I don't know how old you were at Opsail, at the 200th Opsail in New York, the tall ships came in, which they're doing again this year, but the tall ships came in. Lower Manhattan was closed. It was still to this day and my wife and I talk about one of the best days of my life. The 200th anniversary, July 4th in New York City. Lower Manhattan was closed. There was probably 1 million people walking around with a cup in their hand, and everybody was watching the tall ships go by, greeting each other, going around Francis's Tavern. The Germans set up a tent. At the time, there was no high-rise. There was a parking lot. They set up a tent, the biggest tent I ever saw, as big as a football field. We were all in there with the Pa bands, drinking away. Then we went to an Irish joint or two. It was, what a fabulous event it was. So hopefully we can recreate
what you're explaining.
250th.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And what you're
and
explaining
it brought everybody together.
Everybody together. So what you're explaining to me, think about this. So this is where it comes together. The 250th. You were talking about the 200th anniversary the bicentennial.
50 years ago. Yeah, bicentennial. Yeah.
And you're saying how everybody came together in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
And 9/11 is when everybody came together.
That's
right. I'll never forget Liam Flaherty. I think it was at Bronco's funeral. I'm pretty sure he gave a eulogy. He was going through Liam went through the Battery Tunnel, and there was a guy he talked about. There was a guy standing there with a sign, and it just said one word on it: unbroken.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very surreal the way he explained it. And that time, right, those days and months right after 9/11, everybody, even cab drivers weren't honking at you in New York City. Everybody got along.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You know, so we do need to come together again for 250 and the 25th anniversary.
Correct. Yep.
But Chief, it was great having you on the show here, and I hope we have a good message. I hope it was interesting for some people, and I hope we delivered a little bit of a message anyways.
Well, we got a little bit of everything in. So
I think so.
It was a pleasure. Yeah,
it's all good. It's all about, I tell people the Irish Snug is really about, if we're sitting down in an Irish Snug, and if you don't know what that is, go on my website, you'll see what it is. But if you're sitting down in an Irish Snug and you're just shooting the shit, you just, talking, we would be talking about these things if we were sitting down having a pint face to face anyway. And that's what it's about. It's
and
good storytelling.
I think I have about 2 hours before I get to my Irish Snug. So you set the table for it.
All right. Very good.
All right. Nice talking to you, Tim.
Great talking.